The price of belonging. No assistant lasted a week with billionaire Benjamin Hayes. Nora Hayes walked out of the bathroom at 7:15 on a Friday morning completely ready for the beach. Bikini. Beach cover-up. Sunscreen. Hair tied back after 8 minutes of negotiation with the curls, which in humid weather developed their own personality and demanded diplomatic treatment. She was ready. She was going to call Benjamin. The two of them would go down together. It would be romantic, cinematic, exactly the way a honeymoon was supposed to be. She took the first step toward the balcony and stopped, on the floor, between the bed and the wall. There was a rug, tiny, Persian, decorative. The kind room service places beside the bed so you don't step on a cold floor in the morning, and that should not represent a threat to absolutely anyone in the known universe. Nora stood there staring at it. It stayed perfectly still. "Wait," she said slowly. "We've been here for 5 days. 5 days I wake up, step over you, go to the bathroom, come back, step over you again. 5 days of peaceful coexistence." She tilted her head. "Why are you in the middle of the path? Wasn't your spot over there? Did room service plant you here? Do you have instructions? Who sent you?" The little rug did not answer. But the fringe was positioned in a way she hadn't seen before. "Oh no," Nora whispered. "No, not you. You're tiny. You're a baby. You barely have any fringe. I'm not going to let a little honeymoon resort rug." She took the step. The fringe caught her big toe with the absurd precision of something that had been waiting for that moment since check-in. Everything happened at the same time. Her arms flew open, that involuntary emergency penguin gesture that serves absolutely no purpose other than documenting despair. Her knee found the edge of the bed. Her elbow found the nightstand. The cover-up tangled around her legs, and Nora ended up on the floor between the bed and the wall with the hair she had spent 8 minutes negotiating completely unnegotiated. Silence. Benjamin. Out on the balcony, the sound of the keyboard kept going. "I fell." Keyboard. Continuous, unbothered. Nora lifted her head off the floor. Through the open balcony door she could see his back. Laptop open, focus glasses on, coffee beside him. Completely inside something that clearly wasn't the honeymoon and definitely wasn't the wife on the bedroom floor. He had promised not to work. On the second day she had woken up and found him exactly like that, and decided not to say anything, because he looked happy in a way she couldn't bring herself to ruin. But falling on the floor without your husband noticing was a level of invisibility that deserved at least a mental note. She lay there for 3 seconds staring at the resort ceiling, which was way too beautiful to be the ceiling she was looking at in that specific moment of her life. Then she looked at the little rug. "You," she said, pointing from the floor with her index finger. "You're new at this, I can tell. Tiny. Innocent looking. But that right there was way too technical to be a rookie accident. The fringe was positioned. You waited for the right moment. Somebody trained you. Somebody passed along information about my stride pattern." She narrowed her eyes. "Who sent you?" The little rug stayed perfectly still with that specific energy of something that had completed the mission and was not about to give up its employer. She got up, fixed her hair, pointless, but necessary as a gesture of dignity restoration, straightened her cover-up. "Go ahead and tell whoever hired you," she said. "Tell them I uncovered the network. Tell them I know you're a recruit. The veteran in New York is 3-0 against me, and I still show up every day. You think a resort rookie is going to stop me?" She lifted her chin and walked out to the balcony with the posture of someone who had not just suffered a humiliating defeat at the hands of the decorative rug of a 5-star hotel in the middle of her honeymoon. Benjamin kept typing. She picked up the coffee he had ordered to the room. He did that every morning, 2 coffees, without her ever having to ask, the only sign that he knew she existed while he worked. She stood at the edge of the balcony, and then she saw it. On the sand of the beach, an enormous thing, round, brown, absolutely motionless. Nora narrowed her eyes, set the coffee on the table, grabbed her phone, opened the camera, zoomed in. It was a tortoise. A giant tortoise. She turned to him. "Benjamin, look at this." No, like look, seriously, stop everything and look." Nora looked at him, looked at her phone, looked at the sea, looked at the giant tortoise on the beach, sitting there with the absurd calm of something that had survived long enough to stop being impressed by anything. She searched on her phone. Giant tortoise, Seychelles size. The results came up. That thing could be 60 years old, she whispered to herself, eyes wide. 60 years. She existed before me. She'll exist after me. She's probably seen things I'll never understand. Benjamin said, typing. You aren't listening to a single thing I'm saying. Of course I am. What did I say? Tortoise. Specifically, big tortoise. 60 years, Benjamin. Impressive. Nora looked at him one last time, looked at the ocean, at her phone, at the tortoise down on the sand, still perfectly motionless with the kind of peace of something that owed an explanation to absolutely no one. And she went. No warning. No explanation. She went down the balcony steps, crossed the resort garden, past the pool, walked down the stone steps that led to the beach, and stopped about 10 feet from the tortoise, which remained perfectly still, which showed no interest whatsoever in the arrival of a human being in a blue bikini who was clearly having some kind of unplanned experience with marine life. Okay, Nora said quietly, I understand you don't know me, but I need you to know I'm going through an important transitional phase in my life. I got married 10 days ago. I became vice president of a company I still haven't really figured out what it does, and in 4 days I go back to New York. The tortoise looked at the horizon. Exactly. Nora agreed. You get it. You're a wise tortoise. You always get it. She sat down at the edge of the infinity pool with her feet in the water, right next to the tortoise. You must be Beatrice, she said. Governor Beatrice. I don't know why, but you have the face of a Beatrice. You have governor energy. Governor Beatrice neither confirmed nor denied, which Nora interpreted as confirmation. You're the best therapist I've ever had, Beatrice. And mind you, I had one who spent the entire session asking me how things made me feel, which is a completely useless question because if I knew how I felt, I wouldn't be paying somebody to ask me. The phone vibrated on the edge of the pool. Linda Harrison. Nora answered with the phone on her shoulder, still looking at Beatrice. Hi, Mo. Sweetheart, how's the weather there? Is it hot? Did you eat this morning? Because I made lasagna yesterday, but you weren't here, so the lasagna was left for me and your father ate 3 servings. I told him that was too much, but he said he was hungry, but I think he was missing you because that's how he is. He doesn't talk, but he eats, you know? And Lord Whiskers destroyed 2 vases, but your father says he's fine and that I'm overreacting, but I'm not overreacting, Nora. That cat is in mourning. Linda. Bob Harrison's voice. In the background. 1 syllable. I'm talking to my daughter? Bob. The cat is not in mourning, Bob said. He was behind the vase. Why was he behind the vase? Because cats go behind vases. That's not an answer, Bob. That's an observation. There's a fundamental difference. Linda, I'm talking. The shelf came out straight. It did not. I used the level. The level is crooked. Linda, the level is not crooked. Since when do you know anything about levels? Nora was smiling with her whole face. That smile that showed up on its own whenever Linda called before any decision to smile. The shelf came out beautiful, Linda said, swinging back to Nora without pausing for breath. Tell your father. He needs external validation because the internal one clearly isn't working anymore. That's when Nora saw it. In the reflection of the water. 2 figures crossing the open lobby of the resort up above. She froze. The first one was wearing a dark suit. In Seychelles. In that heat. Impeccable dark suit, as if the temperature were other people's problem. The second one was wearing a white dress, carrying a small suitcase, walking with the ease of someone who had arrived exactly where she planned to be. Nora didn't know that man. She had never seen that face. But there was something in the way he crossed the lobby, the posture, the stride, the way people around him automatically made space without him having to ask, that made something tighten inside her. Mom, Nora said. Linda stopped mid-syllable. There's a man here at the resort, in a dark suit, in all this heat. What man? What does he look like? Tall? Elegant? Does he have luggage? Small suitcase, and there's a woman in white right next to him. A woman? Linda completely forgot her volume protocol. What does she look like? Pretty? Elegant? Is she smiling? Yes, the wrong way. Bob in the background with no context whatsoever. Linda, leave the girl alone. Linda lowered her voice. Are you okay? I'm with Beatrice. Who is Beatrice? My therapist here. You found a therapist in Seychelles in 5 days? She's a tortoise, but extremely effective. Linda stayed silent for a second, which for her was the equivalent of an eternity. Call me when you can talk properly. Okay, Mom. Nora? Yeah, you belong anywhere you go. She hung up before Nora could answer. Nora kept staring at the reflection in the water. The two figures stopped in the middle of the lobby. The man in the dark suit said something to the concierge. The concierge pointed toward the balcony of their suite. The two of them looked up. The man she had never seen in her life. Tall, posture that made the entire lobby feel small. But the woman she knew very well. White dress, impeccable bun, the smile that did not need to reach the eyes because it already contained everything that needed to be said. Stella Ward. In Seychelles, at the same resort. Looking straight at her with that expression of someone who had arrived exactly where she planned to be, and had planned it before Nora even knew a plan existed. Nora slowly turned her head toward the balcony of the suite. Benjamin had closed the laptop. He was standing, hands resting on the railing, looking down at the lobby below with his jaw in that position. She had learned to read during the marriage. It wasn't anger, it wasn't fear. It was the expression of a man who had already processed the situation and made the decision before opening his mouth. He recognized the man in the suit. She could see that clearly from down below, and what she didn't see, because he was facing the lobby with his back to her, was the full expression on Benjamin's face. She looked at Beatrice. Beatrice, she said quietly, I know that woman, and he knows that man, and neither of them is here by accident. Governor Beatrice looked at the horizon with the serenity of 60 years of existence, which did not help in absolutely any way, but it was comforting all the same. And you, where are you watching this story from? Write your city and country here in the comments. I love seeing how far this story is reaching. And tell me too, from 0 to 10. What score does this story deserve so far? Now take a deep breath, because what Benjamin received next completely changed the course of the honeymoon. Benjamin's phone vibrated at 2:13 in the afternoon with the delicacy of a grenade. There were 3 words on the screen. No greeting, no context, and no emoji. Restaurant, 2 o'clock. Nora read the message over his shoulder, blinked, read it again. Is that an invitation or a court summons? Benjamin kept looking at the phone with that expression she had catalogued in 6 days of marriage as processing a situation I already processed before you finished reading. With my father, there's never been any difference. He stood up and started changing clothes. In Seychelles, in 90-degree heat, he was putting on a dress shirt. You're going in a dress shirt. In Seychelles, to the resort restaurant. My father is in a suit. Is that an argument for the shirt or against the sanity of the Hayes family? Benjamin buttoned the second button without answering, which was already an answer. I'm coming with you. He only invited me. He sent 3 words. He didn't specify the guest list. Maybe, Nora. Fine, I won't go. She went out to the balcony. Beatrice was still on the beach with that 60-year serenity that did not include fathers-in-law in dark suits on a tropical island. Beatrice. Nora said quietly, my husband's father arrived in Seychelles in a dark suit, in a place where even the waiters wear floral shirts. What does that say about the level of seriousness of this situation? Beatrice looked at the horizon. Exactly, extremely serious. Thank you for the diagnosis. Benjamin left at 2:20 with the posture of a man walking into a war disguised as lunch. The knock at the door came 7 minutes later. Nora opened it. It was Stella Ward. She was wearing a white linen dress that cost more than the resort's nightly rate, and a bun that defied tropical humidity. She wore that smile, the kind that arrived before her like a fire alarm wrapped in good manners. Nora, what a coincidence, Stella said with the ease of someone who had rehearsed the scene. I was heading to the spa and I noticed your suite number is 4, exactly. May I come in for a second? She had already come in. Nora stood holding the door open, looking at the empty hallway as if expecting someone to appear with an explanatory sign. When no one did, she closed the door. Want some water? I'd love some. They sat down in the living area with the energy of 2 people who knew exactly what was going on, but neither of them was going to say it first. Stella crossed her legs with the elegance of old money. Nora tried to do the same, but quickly uncrossed because she looked like a turtle flipped on its back trying to look sophisticated. "How's the honeymoon?" Stella asked with an interest that seemed genuine and was not. "Wonderful. There's a tortoise on the beach. Her name is Governor Beatrice. She's my therapist here. I mean, she's not a real therapist. She's a tortoise, but she listens really well and she doesn't charge by the hour," and Nora closed her eyes. "I should not have said any part of that." "How charming," Stella said, and it sounded like the exact opposite. "How did you find out about the resort?" Nora asked, because the filter between brain and mouth had boarded the honeymoon flight and decided to take a separate vacation. Stella didn't blink. "Richard mentioned it." Nora looked at the little water bottle. "Funny, because Benjamin told me that his father didn't know the name of the resort. He only knew it was in Seychelles, which is almost like saying somebody is in Europe. Doesn't really help much." Stella's answer took half a second longer to arrive. It was the kind of delay most people would miss. "I must have gotten that confused," Stella said. "You must have." Stella folded her hands on her lap with millimetric patience. 4 seconds, that landed like 4 minutes. "How long have you worked with Benjamin?" 4 years. And before he became CEO? Stella looked at the beach horizon as if she were appraising the resort. The pause was even longer than the last one. "I was the vice president." Nora stopped with the water bottle at her mouth. She was the vice president. That was the role Nora was about to take over. That was the chair she was going to sit in and the office she was going to work in 4 days from now. She was on a resort sofa, talking to the woman who had held the same position for 4 years. And the role now belonged to a woman who handed out the title of governor to a tortoise. "It must be strange," Nora said. "What?" "Seeing somebody else in the place that used to be yours." Stella smiled. The wrong smile. The one that didn't reach her eyes because it didn't have permission to. "I never think about it." "Good. I would." 45 minutes passed in which neither of them said what she was actually thinking. When Stella left, the suite carried the weight of when a lot of important things had been said without anyone actually saying anything real. Benjamin came back 2 hours and 23 minutes later. Nora counted every one of those minutes. She was on the bed, hugging the pillow like a piece of tactical gear. Benjamin sat down beside her. A full minute passed while invisible things rearranged themselves around the room. "Someone is buying up the company's shares. They're small blocks split between 6 shell companies over 4 months. Is that bad? If they accumulate 22%, they can call a shareholder meeting and change everything. And he came all the way to Seychelles to tell you that. In a suit, crossing the ocean. That's how he is. Normal people send an email. Your father crossed a continent wearing Italian wool." Benjamin almost smiled. He said something else. "You chose to be CEO, so handle it." Nora stayed quiet. That wasn't a corporate demand. That was a father's demand. The tone was different, and even though she had never heard Richard speak that way, she knew. A father's demand sounds the same in any tone. "What did you answer?" "I asked a question. How did Stella know where we were?" Nora let go of the pillow. "And?" He set the glass down on the table with too much care. Benjamin looked at her. "I didn't tell her." Nora stopped breathing for a fraction of a second. "Then who did? That's what I need you to find out." "That means somebody is leaking information from inside the company." Nora looked at the window. Looked at Beatrice down below on the sand, existing with a dignity that did not include hostile takeovers or unsigned business cards. "We go back tomorrow morning." Benjamin's okay. "It's not okay. No. But it will be." She looked at the sun going down in that specific Seychelles orange she knew she wouldn't see again anytime soon. "I'm going to miss her," Nora said. "The tortoise. The therapist. Nora, I know. We go back tomorrow morning." They sat watching the last sunset of the honeymoon that was never going to be a whole one. Nora went inside to pack. She opened the drawer where she had thrown everything on the first day with that system she called intuitive spatial distribution, and that any normal person would call a mess. At the bottom, under a folded t-shirt, she didn't remember folding, because she didn't fold t-shirts. It was against her principles. There was a business card. The card had no name, no number, and no logo. There was only a single handwritten line in blue ink. They'll say it was Benjamin who didn't know how to defend what was his, but you and I know that it's going to be you holding everything together. Get ready. A friend. Nora flipped the card over. Nothing. Flipped it back and read the line 3 times. She took the card out to the balcony and showed it to Benjamin. He read it twice. Do you recognize the handwriting? No, neither do I. Down below, Beatrice was still in the same place with the serenity of 60 years of existence that did not include anonymous cards in hotel drawers. Beatrice, Nora whispered. I should have booked more sessions. Lord Whiskers was sitting at the exact center of the hallway of the apartment, not in a corner, not near the door. Right in the middle, like a sentry who had spent 6 days processing the absence of his humans and arrived at a formal conclusion that demanded explanations in writing. Benjamin opened the door. The cat looked at him, then at Nora, then at the suitcases, and finally back at the two of them, without moving. Hi, LW, Nora said as she crouched down. I know, 6 days. The cat closed his eyes slowly, opened them, and closed them again. Fair. You're judging me, and I accept the judgment. But, in my defense, it was the honeymoon, which is a post-wedding tradition, one that legally took place. With a judge and the vases, Benjamin said behind her. What? Look at the hallway. Nora looked where he was pointing. 2 vases that used to sit on the hallway shelf were in pieces inside the glass wastebasket. The shards were arranged by size, a clear sign that Bob had cleaned up. Nora, the vases are in pieces. The level was crooked, Benjamin. Lord Whiskers stood up, walked to the couch, sat down, and closed his eyes. The case was closed. The fridge had 6 meal containers labeled with sticky notes written in Linda's handwriting. The lasagna had 4 lines of instructions. Oven at 350 degrees, covered, 25 minutes, uncover for the last 5. Do not forget to turn off the oven. Love you both. Mom. Nora read the note out loud to Benjamin. She wrote, love you both on the lasagna container. She writes, love you both, on everything. The sticky note on the milk in the fridge in Millbrook said, love you both. Seriously? The milk lasted 3 days. The sticky note stayed. At 9, Benjamin's phone vibrated. At 9:04, it vibrated again. At 9:07, one more time. At 9:09, the 4th and 5th messages arrived together. He was standing at the living room window, answering emails at the speed of someone who had accumulated 6 days of corporate urgency on a device that wouldn't stop shaking. Nora was eating Linda's lasagna standing up in the kitchen. It was the breakfast available, and after all, your mother's lasagna had no inappropriate hour. Just go, she said. He turned. I didn't say. Just go. You're answering emails standing up in the living room. The company is calling. Go. We could. Go. I'll take the cat to the office when I head in. Lord Whiskers from the couch opened one eye. Yes, Lord Whiskers, you're going to the office. There are cardboard boxes with ventilation holes because I prepared for this. I researched cat transportation on YouTube. Yes, on YouTube. Don't judge me. You destroy vases. I watch feline transportation tutorials. Everyone has their flaws. Lord Whiskers closed the eye. Benjamin had already left. The difference between walking in as an assistant and walking in as a vice president was the same difference between visiting a house and living in it. The hallway was the same, but the weight of the footsteps changed. She was thinking about this with the very specific solemnity of someone about to have an important moment in life when her heel caught on the fringe of the rug. That rug. The one outside the elevator. The veteran. The one with a score of 1-0 against her since last season. And that had apparently spent 6 days training for this moment. This time, she didn't have Benjamin to catch her. Her arms flew open, that involuntary emergency penguin gesture that served absolutely no purpose other than documenting despair in real time. She did not fall, technically at least. But that, technically, was doing a lot of heavy lifting in the sentence. Priya, who was just passing by with a coffee in her hand and the expression of someone who had been standing there for 20 minutes waiting, announced, Rug. 2. Nora. 0. Marcus, who was supposedly going to the bathroom with his phone in his hand and already recording, commented, No Benjamin to catch you this time. Nora straightened her blazer and fixed her hair, restoring the minimum dignity compatible with the situation. I know. Don't mention it to Benjamin. Already sent it to the group chat. Marcus, it's a historical record, Nora. A corporate document. It's an assault on my balance. Marcus was already down the hallway showing the video to Josh, who had taken off his glasses and was frantically cleaning them while his shoulders shook. The vice president's office was bigger than she expected and smaller than she deserved to be afraid of. It had a window, a desk, a chair, and, in the corner, a fern with yellowing leaves that had clearly been ignored for weeks. Nora walked over to the plant. She examined the leaves, the dry soil, and the roots pressing against the pot. "Okay," she said quietly. "You were waiting for somebody who cared enough to water you. I care. We're going to get along." She walked to the water cooler, came back with a plastic cup and watered it. "My name is Nora. I'm going to call Gertrude." Gertrude maintained her silent posture. "Good, professional. I like it." Josh appeared at the door with a thin folder and the expression of a doctor about to deliver a terminal diagnosis. He lined up 3 pens in his pocket before speaking, a clear sign that the conversation was going to be difficult. "May I?" "You may." He came in, sat down, opened the folder, closed it, and opened it again. "Josh, what is it?" "There are some things you should know about this office." Nora opened the bottom drawer of the desk out of pure habit to put her bag away. Inside, she found a brushed metal pen with initials engraved in silver, SW. She picked up the pen, looked at the object, and then looked at Josh. This was her office. It wasn't a question. Josh nodded slowly, closing his eyes for a second. It was 4 years. Nora put the pen back in the drawer and closed it. The click sounded louder than it should inside that room. Nora looked at Josh and asked, "And does Richard know I'm here? In this office?" He was the one who approved the position. "But it was Margaret who suggested my name?" "Yes." Nora looked out the window. Manhattan was shining out there as if none of this were complicated. "Somebody put me in Stella's office on purpose. Either that was a trap or it was a strategy." Josh lined up a 4th pen. "With the Hayes family, it's usually both." "Margaret said exactly that." Josh asked, genuinely surprised. "When?" "Before Seychelles. She talked to me. Nobody said anything for an amount of time that lasted longer than was comfortable." Nora looked at Gertrude in the window, then at the closed drawer with the SW pen inside, and finally at Lord Whiskers. The cat had come out of the cardboard box with ventilation holes and was now evaluating the executive chair with scientific interest. Lord Whiskers, don't get on the... He got on it anyway. "Okay, an outside consultant in the vice president's chair. Is that irony or a promotion?" She looked at Josh. "Is there any protocol for a cat on the executive chair?" Josh looked at the cat, at the office, and at Nora. "I'll check the manual," he said, and walked out with his 5 pens lined up and the expression of a man who was going to need a 6th. Nora sat down and pulled the keyboard into the right position. Underneath it, taped to the desk with an old piece of adhesive tape, there was a folded sticky note. It was written in small handwriting that wasn't Josh's, wasn't Priya's, and wasn't anyone she knew. "The chair you sit in has a price. It's already been paid once. Don't let it be paid again." Nora read the warning twice. She looked at Gertrude, then at Lord Whiskers in the chair, and finally at the sticky note. "Gertrude," she said quietly, "somebody left a warning for me, or for whoever came after Stella. And who would that somebody be?" The Hayes International Human Resources Manual was 47 pages long and used the word synergy 11 times. Nora made a point of counting. She also counted stakeholders. 14. That was enough to confirm the hypothesis. "Gertrude," she said to the fern in the window, "what is stakeholder synergy?" Gertrude maintained her botanical silence. "Agreed, it doesn't exist. It's corporate fiction. Like a unicorn, but wearing a tie." She skipped to page 12. Then to page 23, then to page 40, and then she closed the manual. "I read it," she announced to the empty office. "Partially. I selected the relevant content in a non-linear fashion, which is really just an elegant way of saying I skipped the boring parts, which were exactly all of them." Lord Whiskers opened one eye from the little corner where he was sleeping. "Don't tell anyone, Lord Whiskers, especially not Josh. He probably read all 47 pages, in order, and with a highlighter." She opened the HR system out of curiosity. She found the employee wellness program and clicked on it. Enrollment, 3.2%. 3%, she repeated to Gertrude. "How is it possible that a wellness program has 3% enrollment? What are they doing? Meditation with electric shocks?" She clicked on the corporate gym tab. Hours, 6 in the morning to 9 at night. 6 in the morning? Who goes to a corporate gym at 6 in the morning? People with sleep problems? Transitioning vampires? Robots that don't need coffee? She clicked on the meditation room. Location, same hallway as the printers. You meditate next to a printer. She looked at Lord Whiskers. A printer? That sounds like a construction site. That's not meditation, Lord Whiskers. That's a sabotage of wellness. She clicked on the lectures. Every Thursday at 3 in the afternoon. Every Thursday. At 3. When everyone has a deadline to deliver. Who sat in a room and said, let's put the relaxation lecture on the most stressful day of the week, at the most impossible time of the day. Then she scrolled down, and she found the answer. It was an internal memo dated 8 months ago. The program shows consistently low enrollment. I recommend keeping it only for the sake of corporate image. The employees are not a primary strategic focus of this leadership. The signature was undeniable. S. Ward. Nora read it 3 times. She closed the laptop, opened it, reread it, closed it again. Gertrude, she actually wrote that. The woman who sat in this chair for 4 years documented that the employees don't matter, inside a program that was supposed to take care of them. Lord Whiskers jumped onto the desk and sat down right on top of the closed laptop. Lord Whiskers, get off the laptop. He did not. Is this consulting or is this sabotage? The cat closed his eyes. Fair enough. She moved the cat aside with the delicacy of a diplomatic negotiation, opened a blank spreadsheet, and started typing. She called Josh. What time does the gym close? 9 at night. And who uses it? Mostly the security team. And the other employees? They're asleep at 6 in the morning. Exactly. And she hung up. She called Priya. What is the suppressed demand for therapy inside this company? How do you know there's a demand? But there is one. It's absurd. At least 2 people a week message me asking for a referral. Thank you so much. She hung up. Typed more. Lord Whiskers came back to the laptop and sat directly on top of the open spreadsheet. Lord Whiskers, get off my... He planted his paws on cell B7 with the authority of a creature with a well-formed opinion on budget projections. All right. You won the battle for B7. I'll work in cell C3. By 5 in the afternoon, Nora had 18 pages of proposal printed on the desk and a cold coffee beside her. Lord Whiskers was sleeping in the executive chair as if it were his, which, at that point, kind of was. And Gertrude was displaying herself in the window, freshly watered for the 3rd time because Nora watered the plant when she needed to think. Margaret walked in without knocking. 2 seconds to assess the scene. Fern in the window, Lord Whiskers in the chair, 18 pages stacked up. You watered the plant. She was yellowing. Her name is Gertrude. I have my office full of plants. None of them received a name. Gertrude needed an identity. She has a very strong personality. She's reserved and professional. She never interrupts. Nora gestured between the 2 of them. Margaret, this is Gertrude. Gertrude, Margaret. Gertrude is the fern. Margaret is my mother-in-law. The 2 of you are corporate allies I still don't fully understand. Margaret stood there with the expression of someone deciding between laughing and cataloging this as relevant corporate data. She picked up the 18 pages and started reading. She did not make a single sound. Nora watched her mother-in-law in the corporate equivalent of reading the market temperature. Nothing changed on Margaret's face, but her eyebrows lifted a millimeter when she got to page 8. You did all of this in how long? Since 2 in the afternoon. 3 hours and 40 minutes. You've been vice president for only 1 day. Technically, it's still the first day, like the sun hasn't even... Present this to Richard on Friday. Nora swallowed hard. On Friday. To Richard. The same one who arrived in Seychelles in a suit and sent my husband to the restaurant using only 3 words. The same. The same person I've never really talked to because he speaks in 3-word sentences and looks at people as if he's calculating the price of everything they've ever done in their lives. That exact one. Okay. Friday. Margaret already had her hand on the doorknob when Nora asked, Who suggested my name for the position? Margaret looked at the strap of her bag before answering. I did. And why? Margaret looked at Gertrude in the window, at Lord Whiskers in the chair, and finally at Nora, standing in the middle of an office that had been Stella's for 4 years. In just 7 hours. Fern with a name, cat with a badge, 18-page proposal. Because Stella knows exactly how to deal with cold competence and calculated ambition. You are neither of those things. Is that an insult or a strategy? Margaret smiled genuinely. With the members of the Hayes family, it's always both. The door closed. Nora looked at Lord Whiskers sleeping. Did you understand any of that? The cat just yawned. Fair. At 9 at night, with the office already empty, Nora was about to close the computer when an email came in. Unknown sender, blank subject line. One line. Be careful what you build here. Some people are just waiting for something good to appear so they can destroy it. No signature. She read it twice, forwarded it to herself with one word in the subject line, keep. She closed the laptop and picked Lord Whiskers up from the chair. Let's go home. Stepping out of the elevator in the lobby, Roberto, the building's security guard, looked up from his screen. Good evening, Mrs. Hayes. Nora stopped for a second. It was the first time someone had called her that at work. No irony, no test, no hidden meaning. Mrs. Hayes, as if it were real. Thank you, Roberto. He looked at the cardboard box with Lord Whiskers inside. The cat can come back tomorrow. I put him in the building system as outside consultant. Nora looked at Lord Whiskers. The animal looked back with the dignity of someone who had just received an official promotion. You have a badge now, Lord Whiskers. He closed his eyes slowly, and on the 35th floor, a light stayed on long after everyone else had gone home. The next day, the coffee machine on the 12th floor was making a protest sound. It wasn't the normal sound of a coffee machine. It was the sound of a machine that had already been through many things. Bad management, reorganizations, and decades of ignored descaling. And that had decided that Tuesday morning was the perfect moment to make a public statement. Nora was walking through the hallway when she heard the sound. She stopped. 15 employees were lined up, staring at the machine with the expression of people who had just lost access to the most important resource in the building. Excuse me, Nora said, walking up. Can I take a look? 15 pairs of eyes turned toward her. The vice president. On her knees on the floor. She was opening the back panel of an industrial coffee machine with the ease of someone who had done it a million times, because in fact she had. The filter was clogged. There was residue in there that looked like it had survived at least 3 CEO terms. Okay, she said to the machine, in a tone of professional partnership. You're overloaded. Serving 40 employees before 9 in the morning isn't easy. I get you. I used to work in food service. I know what it's like not to get maintenance when you need it most. But we're gonna fix this together. You and me. We're a team. The entire hallway held its breath in collective shock. She took out the filter, cleaned the parts, put everything back in place, and closed the panel. Finally, she pressed the button. The coffee machine came back to life with a mechanical sigh of relief. Immediately after came the applause. Marcus, because Marcus was everywhere, always with his phone at the ready, had already recorded everything. This is going straight to the internal channel. Please don't do that. Too late. He already had the editing screen open. Video title, Vice President fixes coffee machine by talking to it like a therapist. Estimated views, everyone. Marcus. But the damage, or the fame, depending on the perspective, was already done. In 20 minutes, the entire floor knew. In 40, the first 3 floors knew as well. In just 1 hour, Nora had received 4 emails from different employees asking if she also did emotional maintenance on printers. She used that political capital. She had not planned to use it, but it happened. Right after, she called Josh and Priya into the conference room at 10 o'clock sharp. She presented her diagnosis: the gym open only at 6 in the morning, the meditation room next to the printers, and the lectures scheduled at 3 in the afternoon on Thursday. Nobody uses those benefits because the program was designed only to exist on paper, not to actually work. Josh lined up 3 pens before speaking. That was a clear warning sign. Do you have board approval for this? I have the authority as vice president to implement internal human resources changes. But technically, yes, technically. Josh lined up another pen. Priya, without even lifting her eyes from the phone screen, declared, "She's right, it's on page 7 of the manual." You read the entire manual? Nora asked. I read every corporate manual. And why? Because you never know when you're going to need them. Nora looked at Josh, at Priya, and then at the 4 pens perfectly lined up on the table. Then we do it. It's going to be called the Humans First program. Gym with real hours, like during lunch and after work. A decompression room that's far from the printers. Therapy coverage in the health plan. And summer Fridays with the workday ending at noon. Josh opened his mouth in shock, closed it, and opened it again. If this goes wrong, but it won't. And how do you know that? Because I'm betting on human beings. And humans always surprise you when someone finally believes in them. Josh lined up his 5th pen, and Priya was already right next to him typing the email. The official announcement went out to 280 employees at exactly 2 in the afternoon. No one made a sound for 15 long seconds. On the 35th floor. They were 15 seconds that felt exactly like that moment of tension right before getting a test grade where you know you studied, but you still aren't sure if you passed. Right after that, Josh could be heard yelling in the hallway. Summer Fridays starting at noon. He screamed with the high-pitched voice of someone who had just received news that miracles exist. I'm crying. He wasn't crying. Well, he was almost crying. I swear I'm not crying. He was. Priya appeared in the office. She hugged Nora with the force of a medical emergency rescue. You're unbelievable. Truly. Marcus walked into the room waving a sheet of paper. 280 signatures to overthrow Benjamin and elect Nora as president of the company. Marcus, first of all, that's a mutiny. Second of all, there are 280 people, and the email went out exactly 2 minutes ago. How did you manage to collect all the signatures already? I prepared the document beforehand. Just as a democratic precaution. Benjamin appeared in the hallway with the confused expression of someone who had arrived late to the revolution. A mutiny already? We've only been married for 2 weeks. Marcus replied without a hint of guilt. She gave us summer Fridays with a noon cutoff. We'd definitely vote for her. Benjamin looked at Nora, then at Marcus, stared at the petition paper, and looked at Nora again. I understand the situation. I'd vote for her too. Nora covered her face with both hands. She was smiling and feeling mortified at the exact same time. At 4:30 in the afternoon, Stella showed up unexpectedly at the office door. She was holding a folder in one hand and an open manual in the other. Page 7, paragraph 3. She slapped the open book onto Nora's desk. The reallocation of departmental resources without prior board approval constitutes a protocol violation. Every word she spoke sounded as dry as old paper. This completely invalidates all the implementation you've done over the past 2 days. Nora looked at the manual, then at Stella, and then at Gertrude by the window. As usual, Gertrude was absolutely no help. Then I'll present this to the board on Friday so we can get formal approval. Richard doesn't attend human resources meetings. This Friday he will. Stella froze where she stood. Her smile stalled for a second. It was a very brief moment, but incredibly visible. Have you confirmed this with him yet? Not yet. Then let me know when you do. She left and slammed the door. The office was left with a strong trail of expensive perfume mixed with corporate threat. Gertrude, Nora said, I need to call Margaret, urgently. Margaret answered on the second ring. Nora explained everything to her mother-in-law in exactly 40 seconds. That was a personal record for conciseness. I'll call him. And how do you guarantee he'll show up? I'll tell him it's worth seeing. Worth seeing? What does that mean? It means Richard requires a very specific argument. Saying something is important doesn't work with him. But saying it's worth seeing always works, because it awakens the only thing that still sparks inside him these days. Curiosity. And what if he doesn't get curious enough? Then I simply mention your name. That's going to make the situation worse. That's going to make things better. Have a good night, darling. And she hung up the call before Nora could even protest. After all, Margaret always hung up the phone the exact moment a conversation got exactly where she wanted it, and never lingered a second after that. Lord Whiskers, Nora said to the cat sleeping sprawled across the executive chair. She hung up on me before I could protest. Lord Whiskers opened just one eye. I also think she already knew I was going to call for help. She probably had already spoken with Richard. He probably already confirmed. And most likely, this was all just a well-rehearsed act to make me feel like I had some active participation in his choice to go. Is that family genius or cruel manipulation? Lord Whiskers simply closed his eye. Same answer as always. I'll take it as validation. At 9 at night, already back in her apartment, Nora's phone vibrated. It was a message from Priya. Richard just confirmed his attendance for Friday. Nora sat exhausted on the living room floor. Lord Whiskers jumped down next to her and rested his head on her lap. That was the very first time the cat had done that since arriving in Manhattan. Friday, Lord Whiskers. She gently stroked the cat's head. Friday, I present an 18-page proposal to the man who arrived in Seychelles wearing a suit and who only communicates in 3-word sentences. But the program is going to work either way, because I believe in humans. Lord Whiskers didn't answer, but he also didn't leave her lap. The phone rang. It was Linda at 9:37 at night. It turned out Linda Harrison possessed the divine gift of calling at the exact moment her daughter's emotions were already at the absolute limit of human capacity. "Sweetheart, I'm just calling real quick because your father wants to go to sleep and I need to know. Tell me, how was your first day?" It was really good, Mom. Are you crying?" "No." "Yes, you are. I can hear it." "I'm not crying, Mom. I just have the cat on my lap." "And the cat makes you cry now?" Bob exclaimed in the background, spending only 2 dragged-out syllables. "Going to sleep. I'm coming, Bob. Sweetheart, call me back tomorrow and tell me everything. I love you." Bob loves you very much too, but he only shows it by staying quiet because he's a man and men are very weird. Kisses. She hung up. Nora looked at Lord Whiskers. "My mother just diagnosed my emotional state over the phone in exactly 11 seconds. Is that a superpower or just an invasion of privacy?" Lord Whiskers kept his eyes closed. The phone vibrated again. It was a text message from Stella Ward. Page 7, paragraph 3. "We'll see each other on Friday." Nora looked at the illuminated phone screen, at the cat lying on her lap, and finally at the immensity of Manhattan glowing outside. Lord Whiskers. The cat opened one eye. "She knows very well that I know what she did, and I know very well that she already knows I figured it out. But so far, no one has actually said any of this out loud." Lord Whiskers slowly closed his eye. Friday is going to be a war. Nora was in the 35th floor bathroom, having a motivational talk with herself, facing the mirror. "Don't mix up the names, don't look at Thompson before he speaks, and do not mention the fixed coffee maker as a management credential. Don't mention it again. You already brought it up before. Twice, actually, in separate emails. Both emails are on the permanent HR record." She straightened the navy blue blazer Margaret had sent her, which came with a short note. "Wear this. You're going to need armor. MH. You are a vice president. You produced 18 pages of a corporate proposal in exactly 3 hours and 40 minutes. You fixed that warrior of a coffee maker with a lot of professional dignity. Yeah, that last part is going to have to stay out of the presentation." Lord Whiskers was inside her bag because she had brought him without planning to, and now had absolutely nowhere to leave him. The cat appeared over the leather edge and evaluated the bathroom mirror. "You're not coming with me, Lord Whiskers." He slid back down to the bottom of the bag. "It's not tagging along. It's called field consulting." The board meeting room was set up for 12 people. A long wooden table and heavy leather chairs. The windows showcased the Manhattan skyline, as if the city itself were a visual argument in favor of whatever decision was going to be made inside. Richard was sitting silently at the back of the room, with no advance warning that he had arrived and no announcement. He was just there, as if he had materialized out of thin air, utilizing that specific Hayes family ability to appear exactly when nobody expected and occupy the entire room without needing to say a single word. Marcus plugged the projector cable into the laptop. Slide 1, the program title, looked professional and clean. Slide 2, the situational diagnosis. It was good, with all the data crystal clear. But suddenly, Nora's presentation notes appeared wide open on the big screen. Not the slide text, but the notes. Those hidden annotations that are only supposed to be visible on the presenter's computer. The kind of notes nobody else should ever see. The ones that existed exclusively as a private conversation between Nora and her inner Nora, who desperately needed instructions to avoid causing a diplomatic incident. The projector cable had inverted the screen display settings. On the screen, in bold letters big enough to be read from any chair in the room, shone the words, "Thompson decides with his kidneys. Smile first and speak later. Never call him Mr. Kidney." Priya, sitting at the back of the room, squeezed her eyes shut. Marcus looked at the projector, then at the screen, and then at Nora. He looked back at the projector with the expression of someone who was going to need a lot of therapy, which happened to be the exact program they were trying to get approved right there. Nora looked at the screen, then at Thompson in the third chair on the left, and then back at the screen. Thompson read the text out loud in his head. Then he read it again. Nobody in the entire room moved a single muscle for 3 seconds that felt like 30. But then he laughed. And it wasn't a polite smile. Nor was it a corporate courtesy chuckle. It was a loose, booming laugh. Genuine, incredibly loud, and as unexpected as thunder on a clear day. The kind of laugh that comes from deep within the soul and doesn't ask for permission. "I'm Thompson," he said, wiping the corner of his eyes. "And you are absolutely right about the way I make my decisions." 2 other executives next to him laughed as well, more out of contagion than choice. The energy of the entire room changed after that. The atmosphere felt less like a tribunal and more like a meeting. As if someone had just opened a window that nobody even knew existed. Nora took a deep breath and began to present. With the room finally relaxed, thanks to the accidental miracle of a projector with inverted screens, she presented her real plan. She showed real data, real projections. The cold math that Margaret had helped her refine was built right into the proposal. $300,000 in cost and $500,000 in projected savings from employee turnover. Each department was evaluated. Every number was explained in clean language, without using words like synergy or stakeholders, because Nora firmly believed that words nobody understands serve only to hide the facts, rather than explain them. Stella tried to interrupt the presentation on page 4. But Thompson cut her off immediately. "Let the girl finish." Stella tried to do the same thing again on page 9. Thompson, without even looking at her, decreed, "I still want to see the rest of the proposal." At the very back of the room, Richard showed no reaction. He didn't stop her, nor did he approve anything. He simply watched, with that intensity of someone calculating something that went way beyond the numbers on the screen. Something that had directly to do with the person standing in front of the screen and not with what was written on it. Nora turned off the projector and closed the presentation with a click. Richard adjusted his posture in the leather chair and spoke for the very first time. "If your program fails and, in the meantime, the employees have reorganized their lives based on your new rules, with gym schedules, therapy, and summer Fridays, what happens to them?" The entire room froze. Not a single other executive had even thought of asking that question. None of them. That's because the question wasn't about money. It was simply about people. And people didn't fit into the kind of financial spreadsheet they were all used to reading. Nora looked Richard right in the eyes. The correct answer, the calculated corporate answer, and the one any trained vice president would give, would be something involving a gradual rollback, transparent communication, and clean transition protocols to wash her hands of it. But her mouth opened, and something entirely different came out. An answer where she put her own job on the line to protect the team. Unfortunately, they will have to go back to the grueling previous schedule. The benefits program will be shut down for good, but the bill for that failure won't be paid by them. I will take full responsibility and step down from my position as vice president. Benjamin, who had been watching everything off to the side, didn't change his facial expression. But Nora felt it. His posture shifted by at least a millimeter. The kind of weight shift that only someone who has been married to a person for 2 weeks and known him for months is capable of noticing. Richard tapped his fingertips on the mahogany table. "Approved, on a provisional basis. You have 6 weeks. And exactly at that moment, Lord Whiskers decided to pop up again over the edge of Nora's leather bag. The cat looked at the people in the room, and the entire room looked at him. 12 top-tier executives, the acting CEO or retired former CEO at the back of the table, and a plump orange cat right in the middle of a board meeting. He looked back at everyone present with absolute feline judgment. He gave that look of someone who evaluates the room and has already reached a conclusion, but isn't going to share it with anyone, because it's none of your business. Thompson sat up straight in his chair. Was this cat inside that bag this entire meeting? He's an external consultant, Nora replied quickly. He has a badge. Lord Whiskers climbed out of the bag. The cat walked across the long table with the calm of someone who had all the time in the world to live and jumped onto the table. And he sat directly in front of Richard. The two stared at each other. Cat and former CEO held eye contact uninterruptedly. And neither of them blinked. What's his name? Richard asked with his deep voice. His name is Lord Whiskers. Richard looked at the cat a little longer, then got up and walked toward the door. He left the room without saying another word. Lord Whiskers tracked his movement with his eyes until the double wooden doors closed. Was that attitude of feline approval or disapproval? Nora asked the room. Obviously, nobody there knew how to answer her. A short time later, in the hallway, Nora and Benjamin were walking out of the meeting room. Out of nowhere, Richard walked past them and stopped suddenly. He didn't look at Nora. The old man looked toward the end of the hallway ahead, as if his words were floating right there in front of him, just waiting for him to reach out and grab them with his tongue. My wife was exactly like that too. One sentence. Exactly 7 words. He walked away before his daughter-in-law could even process the gravity of that statement. Nora stood frozen in place. Benjamin didn't move either. The empty 35th floor hallway seemed even bigger than it actually was. He never does that, Benjamin murmured quietly. Never does what? Praise someone like that. Compare someone to my mother. He looked at his wife. He spent years living in Tokyo, taking care of that branch without saying a personal word to anyone on the board. And now, out of nowhere, my father compared you to Margaret Hayes in the hallway of a company. But is that a good thing? Nora, that is huge. Nora kept mulling it over in her head. Richard Hayes, the man who only spoke in short 3-word sentences and who crossed an entire ocean wearing a heavy Italian wool suit, had just confessed that she reminded him of his own wife. The same Margaret who sent her corporate dresses with armor notes and who hung up the phone with the most perfect timing in Manhattan. Benjamin. Your entire family is very confusing. They've always been like this. Back in her vice president office, Nora opened the door and found Stella inside. She wasn't sitting in the chair, but standing with her back to the entrance, just looking at the view through the window. You won today, Stella said without even turning her head to look at her. Her tone of voice wasn't one of festive congratulation, but rather a grim corporate inventory. But you ended up betting your own job for the chance, she added. Betting on something is the same as believing in it. 6 weeks is very little time for a program to gain traction. It's enough time. Stella turned around and grabbed the forgotten folder she had come back to get. Near the exit, Nora finally asked the question that had been stuck in her throat. That anonymous business card I found in my things back in Seychelles. Was that you? Stella stopped with her hand on the doorknob. She didn't even need to turn back to answer. I wasn't the one who left it. And the door closed. Nora stood static in the office, processing that new information. She looked at Gertrude and then at Lord Whiskers, who had gone back to snuggling in the executive chair. But if she wasn't the one who left the note, Nora said slowly, putting the pieces together in her head, then who did? Gertrude maintained her classic inertia. Lord Whiskers merely closed his eyes to go back to sleep. Neither of the two consultants knew the answer. But the uncomfortable question hovered in the room for the rest of the day. Nora was in the bathroom of the Hayes mansion watching a YouTube video. But it wasn't just any video. It was content called Complete Formal Dinner Etiquette, the definitive guide. Hosted by a woman covered in pearls, who spoke as if the future of all human civilization depended on the correct choice of forks. 15 pieces of silverware appeared all at once on the screen. 15. Nora whispered in disbelief at her phone. In what universe does a meal need 15 pieces of silverware? Is this a dinner party or a surgical procedure? Who looks at a table and thinks, you know what's missing here? 11 more forks? Margaret knocked on the door. Nora, darling, she quickly closed the video. I'm coming. Margaret walked in. looked at the phone, then at Nora, and back at the phone again. You were studying the forks. I was researching. It's different. Research implies scientific method and emotional detachment. I had the detachment, right up until the moment I saw the number 15. Then I lost it all. Darling. Margaret adjusted Nora's hair with the economy of movement of someone who was born fixing other people. I'll tell you a secret. Half the people out there don't know either. They copy their neighbor and fake confidence. High society is just one big theater. Everyone is improvising. That doesn't make me feel any more relaxed. And it really shouldn't, just more lucid. Nora was wearing the dress Margaret had sent her with that note. This is your armor. Don't argue. It was a dark green model, elegant without being flashy, the kind that said, I belong here, without needing to shout. The two of them walked out and headed down the mansion hallway. Portraits of Hayes' ancestors on the walls, looking at her with accumulated ancestral disapproval. And right there, right at the entrance to the dining room was he, the rug, Persian, antique, probably older than most of the guests, and certainly more expensive. Nora saw it and stopped immediately. You, she said, threateningly. The rug didn't answer, but the fringe was positioned right in the path. She planned every step, calculated every angle, made a detour to the left with a 15-centimeter margin from the deadly fabric. And even so, her heel got caught. Everything happened in slow motion. Her arms flew open, emergency penguin documenting despair in real time. Her body was thrown forward. The entire universe had conspired in favor of the fabric. Benjamin caught her. Of course he caught her, because Benjamin always caught her, with the serenity of someone who had already included the catch Nora after rug attack clause in his own marriage contract. Countess Helena Dimitrescu, royal tiara, diamond necklace that could fund an entire school, black dress that cost the GDP of a small country, witnessed the scene from start to finish. She didn't blink for exactly 2 seconds. My dear, Helena said, and she burst out laughing. A genuine, loud, and real laugh. From someone who hadn't truly laughed in many years and had just found a wonderful reason to. You are the most refreshing thing that has entered this mansion in the last 20 years. The Countess took Nora's arm as if the two of them had been best friends their entire lives. Come on, I'll teach you which fork is the right one. Benjamin looked accusingly at the rug. The Persian rug showed absolutely no expression. Rug's scoreboard. 3-0 against Nora. The table was set for 12 people. Richard reigned at the head of the table with the presence of someone who seemed to have built the table, the room, and possibly invented the worldwide concept of formal dining. Stella was present wearing scarlet red, the red of someone who chose their outfit to be seen. Helena sat next to Nora, an ally ever since the rug disaster. The first course arrived. Nora counted the forks lined up on the side. 5. She whispered to Helena. The one furthest to the outside is the right one, Helena whispered back. This tiny one right here? Yes, but it looks like a doll's fork. It looks like somebody confused the silverware section with the dollhouse toy section. Helena pressed her lips together to keep from laughing. The second course arrived. Something moved in the ice. This is... Nora looked on in shock. Moving. This has an opinion. This is alive inside my plate. The man sitting across from her pointed. They are fresh oysters, Mrs. Hayes. Nora stared hard at the oyster. It didn't look back, but it radiated a strange energy, the energy of something that was ripped from the depths of the ocean with a lot of accumulated resentment. Okay, on the count of 3. 1, 2. She swallowed without chewing. She closed her eyes with deep and immediate physiological regret. This tastes like the entire ocean, with added resentment. The entire ocean condensed inside this slippery thing. Salt, pure bitterness, and the absurd longing to be free. I can feel the heartache. It's a very specific kind of kidnapped crustacean heartache. Helena murmured, extremely discreetly. I can't stand them either, but I pretend to enjoy them so I don't offend the French chefs. How long have you been pretending to like them? 40 years. 40 years swallowing bottled oysters with oceanic resentment? Helena covered her mouth with the linen napkin to keep from laughing out loud. 2 men at the end of the table looked over with curiosity. One of them was smiling. Stella chose dessert time to attack, with a sweet voice, the kind of sweet made of poison wrapped in the finest satin. Nora, you studied literature in college, didn't you? Do you plan to use that in any way in your new corporate position? The sentence that everyone translated perfectly, "You are useless and you don't belong here." Nora smiled back. Literature teaches you absolutely everything about people, true motivations, what drives them and what paralyzes them. She looked directly into Stella's eyes. Literature teaches us how to identify the arc of petty villains in corporate narratives long before the second act is over. Helena raised her crystal glass. "I'll toast to that." Margaret, on the other side of the table, hid a wide smile behind her napkin. Richard, impassive at the head of the table, did not react, but his eyes went toward Stella and returned with a gleam that was too quick to be named. Dinner ended and the guests moved to the living room. Nora stopped near the window and saw, through the glass, Richard and Stella in the garden talking privately. Stella reached her hand out toward Richard's arm. He pulled away immediately. Discreet, almost imperceptible. But Nora saw it. Helena appeared next to her with a glass of champagne and the elegance of someone who had been showing up in strategic places for 40 years. "You are reading what's happening in the garden?" "Yes." "And what are you seeing?" "Two people who want exactly the same thing, but for completely opposite reasons." Helena looked at the figures on the lawn. "I've spent 30 years watching corporate politics disguised as a social event. I've come to the exact same conclusion as you." She raised her glass. "Welcome to the snake elite, my dear." Back to dessert. The uniformed maid removed the dirty plate. Underneath it, a small envelope with no name. Nora opened it slowly. White card, one line of handwriting in blue. "You really impressed someone tonight, but not who you think, no signature." The handwriting in blue. The note from Seychelles had also been written in blue. The handwriting was different, disguised, but it was the same color and the same type of ink. "What is it?" Benjamin asked beside her. "Nothing. A reminder. I'm already putting it away." Before they left, Richard stopped next to Nora in the entrance hall. He didn't look her in the eyes. He looked at the empty wall of the hallway, as if his words were leaning against it, waiting to be said. Stella only knew the name of the resort because someone from inside the company leaked that information. "But pay attention. I wasn't the one who did it." He turned and walked away before she could answer. Nora stood still, her fingers frozen. That wasn't a paternal warning. It was a request for an alliance. The very first real alliance with the patriarch of the Hayes family. Benjamin appeared beside her and murmured. "What did he say?" "That he wasn't the one who told Stella about Seychelles." "Nora." "I know." She looked at the empty garden where Richard and Stella had been. "Your father just offered me an alliance to destroy his own ally. Former ally." "And since when is that?" Benjamin didn't answer, but Nora saw that he looked tense and tired. The answers would start arriving soon. Josh walked into the office with the expression of a doctor about to deliver bad test results. 3 pens lined up in his pocket before sitting down, folder opened, closed, opened again. "Josh, you are making me nervous. I found a small inconsistency in the accounts." Define small. $47,000 with no invoice registered anywhere. "Open the folder." They opened the first document, then the next, and the next. Josh lined up one more pen on the desk with each new problematic file, an anxiety thermometer in stationary format. At 2 in the afternoon, Nora stopped and counted the row. "Do you normally keep 11 pens in your jacket?" Josh looked at them like someone who was caught red-handed with no defense prepared. "Today, I'm more anxious. And normally?" 6. "Josh, you doubled your stock because of an accounting file. That is extremely relevant HR data." Nora typed into the browser. Ward Strategic Solutions. Simple page, discrete logo, corporate strategic consulting, founded 3 months ago. She scrolled down to the footer. Small print, the kind that exists exclusively to not be read. Founding partner and director, S. Ward. She closed the laptop, opened it, closed it again. She is paying herself with our money. Josh, with the technical precision of someone who is about to be interrupted. Ward Strategic is the one receiving the payment. Technically, it's a service contract. Josh? Yes, it's the same thing. Lord Whiskers jumped onto the desk and sat exactly on top of the laptop, with the authority of someone protecting courtroom evidence. Nora looked at him. $85,000 on office decor in 6 days, and $34,000 on a business trip to Paris where she was the only one on the flight. Meeting with who? Lord Whiskers? With herself? A transatlantic self-evaluation? Lord Whiskers closed his eyes with the serenity of someone who had documented the facts and wasn't going to comment. That was when the door opened. Margaret walked in as if she had been summoned, and in some dark sense, she always was. 2 seconds to evaluate the scene. Josh with 11 pens lined up, LW sitting on the laptop, Nora standing with the expression of someone who had just found what she was looking for without knowing she was looking for it. I see you found them. And you already knew about this? Since last Tuesday. I know perfectly well what day it is. Does Richard know too? For even longer. And you're just letting her continue? We are documenting. When we act, and we will act, she won't be able to deny a single thing. But that's not the right thing to do. No, it's called corporate strategy. Sounds like the same thing to me. The difference resides entirely in the result. Josh tried to sneak out quietly. I think I can prob. Stay right there, Margaret cut in, without even looking at him. He stayed. He pulled a 12th pen from the bottom of his pocket and lined it up next to the others with the resignation of someone who had accepted his own pen-by-pen destiny. Nora looked at the row. 12. Absolute new record. Her phone vibrated on the desk. Linda Harrison. She answered out of pure reflex. Sweetheart, calling real quick because Bob installed a new shelf and it's crooked and I need an impartial witness. Mom, I'm right in the middle of a serious situation here. It's clearly crooked. Can you just tell your father that? Just that one sentence. It takes 2 seconds. Linda, Bob said in the background, with the voice of a man who had already processed an entire marriage and reached peace. I am talking to our daughter, Bob. Nora, love, you sound tense. Is it work or is it a man? It's work, Mom. Okay. Kisses? Bob loves you too, but you know how he is. Call me later. She hung up. Nora looked at Margaret, who watched the scene with the controlled expression of someone who wasn't going to comment on that right now, but was going to file it away forever. My mother, Nora said unnecessarily. I noticed, Margaret replied. It was then that Priya opened the door. She placed a newspaper on the desk without saying a word and left before anyone could ask. For Priya, who knew everything before it happened, silence was a siren. It was the cover of the New York Tribune. A photo of Nora at the gala. The unlikely wife, how a simple barista infiltrated a billionaire dynasty. Anonymous inside sources question the competence of Hayes International's new vice president. The article used the 3 years at the coffee shop, the 37 rejections prior to Hayes, the exact salary of her position, her bank account balance when she was first hired, numbers that lived in a confidential HR file, numbers that absolutely nobody on the outside should know. Only 4 people had access to that file, Nora said. I am well aware of that, Margaret replied with equal firmness. And you are one of them. I am well aware of that too. Neither of them blinked. The air between them weighed a ton. It wasn't me, Nora. Nora stayed locked in her mother-in-law's eyes, absorbing every micro-expression on that impenetrable face. I know it wasn't. How are you so sure? Because you wouldn't start a new war before finishing the one you're already fighting. Margaret stood completely still. It was that rare expression of someone who received an answer she never expected and had no way of pretending she did. Josh, who had remained so perfectly still, he almost turned into furniture, cautiously raised his hand. Can I check the publication's metadata? I have a cousin in IT. Go, he returned in 20 minutes with a printed sheet. Access to the HR file came from an external server, location completely masked. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. Nora looked at the paper, at Josh, at the row of 12 pens. Stella's fraud and the leak of my file. Same author? Out of nowhere, Josh pulled out a 13th pen. Blue, plastic, one that absolutely no one knew existed, and lined it up with the others with the solemnity of a ceremony. Either Stella has someone helping her, someone with technical access she wouldn't have on her own. Lord Whiskers opened one yellow eye and stayed still. Exactly what I was thinking, Nora said. That night at the apartment, Lord Whiskers was sleeping on the couch. Benjamin had gone to Richard's private office, a closed-door conversation that Nora didn't ask a single thing about because sometimes not asking is also a form of care. The phone vibrated. Unknown number. She let it go to voicemail. An audio message arrived. Female voice, middle-aged, extremely controlled. the kind of voice of someone who measures every word before letting it go. Nora, you don't know me yet, but I know exactly who leaked your file and why, and I guarantee it wasn't who you're thinking of right now. Call me before dawn. She listened to it 3 times, saved the number as... Lord Whiskers placed his paw on the phone screen. Is that approval or a warning? He pulled his paw back and stared at nothing. Inconclusive diagnosis. Thank you for the consulting. Benjamin arrived later. He read the headline without changing his expression. That specific absence that Nora had already learned to read has contained anger that didn't need volume to prove it was real. He walked over to the window, stood there for a minute looking at the asphalt with a clenched jaw. I know who wants to destabilize us like this. Is it Stella? Stella is just the instrument. Somebody is using her. Who? He turned around. Deep in Benjamin's eyes there was something she had never seen there before. It wasn't CEO anger. It was fear, the specific kind that has absolutely nothing to do with a company. Benjamin. What is going on? I need to confirm something. He grabbed his phone. 3 rings. Somebody answered. Dad? Who is buying up our shares? Nora was standing in aisle 3 of the pharmacy, staring blankly at the illuminated shelf as if it held the answer to a question she hadn't yet found the courage to ask out loud. She had left the office at 3 in the afternoon, claiming she had a migraine attack. That wasn't a complete lie, seeing as she really did have a migraine brewing. But she also harbored a massive suspicion that didn't fit inside the boardroom and required the support of a pharmacy, and required it immediately. Lord Whiskers, she had said to the cat right before running out. Guard my office. If Stella shows up at the door, bite her. The animal merely opened one eye and closed it again, which she promptly interpreted as, I don't bite, but I assure you I will document her presence as an external consultant. The pharmacy was only 2 blocks away. Nora located the correct aisle and stopped right in the middle of it. She looked at the test boxes lined up on the metal shelf with the exact same tension of someone evaluating a casting call for a play she hadn't rehearsed. She picked up 3 boxes of completely different brands, because distinct brands always offer complementary scientific perspectives. She said to the empty pharmacy aisle. And because not trusting just a single result isn't paranoia, it's a method. I have my own method. I am the vice president. And all vice presidents have their method. You're the woman from that newspaper, a teenage girl said suddenly, right behind her in line. The girl was chewing gum with the chaotic energy of someone who had just identified a local celebrity. The unlikely wife. You're her. You're the broke barista who married the rich billionaire in a wheelchair. Nora looked at the girl stunned. Then she looked at the 3 boxes in her own hand, and finally, back at the teenager. I've never been here in this pharmacy, but you're right here in front of me right now. And you have 3 tests in your hands. My present state of being is a philosophically debatable issue, and they aren't tests. These boxes are just vitamins. Vitamins used to test whether women are pregnant. They are highly complex vitamins, multi-functional, and they came from an adjacent shelf, but due to an unfortunate visual design coincidence, they merely look like... You're pregnant, aren't you? Good afternoon. Nora yelled and swiped her credit card on the machine with the exact speed of someone trying to defuse a ticking time bomb. Thank you very much for your service. Have a happy Tuesday. Today is Thursday. Then have a happy Thursday. She bolted out through the glass doors. The teenager stood there in line, displaying the victorious expression of someone who was going to feed the gossip in 3 different WhatsApp groups for the next 15 uninterrupted days. Back to the apartment bathroom. The 3 tests were lined up on the sink, assembling a severe scientific tribunal. Lord Whiskers wasn't home, because the cat was still keeping watch at the office, which meant Nora was entirely alone with 3 urinated plastic sticks, a cold marble sink, and 0 human emotional support. Beatrice, she said, looking up at the plaster ceiling. You're over there in Seychelles living with your 60 years of pure natural serenity. Meanwhile, I'm trapped inside a Manhattan bathroom, dealing with 3 pregnancy tests, and there are absolutely no tortoises around here. That's not fair. I desperately need your professional support, and you aren't right here by my side, solely and exclusively because you are a reptile, And as everybody knows, reptiles don't catch flights. Well, probably. The phone rang on the counter. It was Linda. And of course it was Linda. All because Linda Harrison possessed an absurd maternal emotional radar that worked from miles away and always activated at the exact moment her daughter needed an instant of total silence. "Sweetheart, Bob just baked a lasagna. I'm sending your Tupperware in an Uber. Do you prefer the 4-cheese or the 5-cheese version?" "Mom, I swear right now is not the best." "5, I'll send the 5-cheese lasagna. I love you. Bob is right here next to me waving happily. I think he loves you too. But as you know, he doesn't say it out loud because he's a man." Bob's raspy voice emerged in the background of the call. "Send the 5. And she hung up the call just as fast as she answered. Nora looked at the phone, perplexed. She looked back up at the ceiling and finally, at the first test that was still processing the result. "Okay, 3 minutes left. I can wait 3 long minutes. I am a grown woman. I manage entire departments at the company. I survived Richard Hayes wearing a suit on an island in Seychelles. I survived oysters that radiated a deep oceanic resentment. I can absolutely for sure wait 3 measly." She looked at the little plastic window. It was positive. Okay, she looked at the display of the second stick. Also positive. Okay. Look, a single test is a sample. 2 tests already constitute a coincidence. But real good science requires 3. Cutting-edge science requires continuous replication. Not to mention the margin of error actually exists in the world. Plus natural statistical fluctuation. Things that, and the third one appeared with the dreaded lines on the screen, turning positive before she could even finish her logical sentence. Okay. She sat on the cold bathroom floor. That room apparently was the exact place where she made all the most dramatic and important decisions of her adult life. And that probably said something deeply disturbing about her psyche that she simply didn't intend to process right now. And, out of nowhere, she started to smile. She broke into a huge smile, with no prior planning and no decision. The kind of magical smile that shows up long before mental permission is granted to the body. That involuntary, chemical, and wonderful act, much bigger than her own face, bigger than the limits of the bathroom, and even bigger than the entire island of Manhattan. "Hi," she whispered, her head bowed toward her flat stomach. "Hi, tiny person. My name is Nora, and I am your mother. That weird woman who talks to tortoises on the beach, chats with old ferns, picks mortal fights with corporate rugs, and who just bought 3 pregnancy tests on the run just to escape a teenage girl chewing gum in the middle of a corner pharmacy. Anyway, welcome to this family. It's all very chaotic, but I guarantee you it's good. It's like a really, really good place." Benjamin arrived at the apartment at 6:12 in the evening. He called out to her from the entrance hallway, and she answered him from inside the bathroom. "I'm right here," and that was where he found his wife. She was sitting sprawled out on the tile floor, with the 3 tests lined up on the sink, her eyes wet and very red, but sporting the biggest smile he had ever seen on her face. Benjamin froze in the doorway. He looked confused at the piled-up tests. Then he looked at his weeping wife, and looked back at the 3 tests again. "Those are pregnancy test sticks," he concluded, adjusting the wheels of his chair on the hardwood floor. 3 of them. "Because I didn't trust the result of the first one, nor the result of the second one, and I didn't trust the universe itself around me." "And what are they?" "They are positive, my love. Unanimously positive. The board's decision was unanimous. There were no dissenting votes of abstention at the polls. Our at-home scientific tribunal is officially closed." He made a Herculean effort, abandoned the chair, and sat on the icy floor right next to her. The billionaire began to laugh uncontrollably, and then he began to cry copiously. He was doing all of that at the exact same time, stepping right into that bizarre state that didn't even have a clinical name because it encompassed both emotions together in an extreme state of confusion. Benjamin tried to stand up in a rush to hug her. However, amidst the passionate desperation, he painfully hit his elbow on the hard side of the marble bathtub. He ended up completely losing his center of gravity and the balance he had achieved and fell back down to the floor, which he did with the exact pathetic elegance of a highly emotional sack of potatoes. "Love, you just crashed on the floor. I am absolutely fine. But you're sprawled all over the floor." We're having a baby, Nora? Oh my God, we're sprawled on the floor having a baby. She pulled him against her own body to give the stiffest, clumsiest hug in the entire history of modern world hugs. They were just two adults thrown on the cold bathroom floor, laughing like children and crying their eyes out simultaneously. There were 3 pregnancy tests tossed on the sink, and they weren't displaying even a shred of postural dignity. Benjamin stretched out a clumsy arm and placed his warm, flat palm over his wife's stomach. Obviously, there was nothing to feel there yet. It was way too early for anything. But that gesture of his was very real. "Hi," he murmured quietly to the untouched belly. "I'm your father, and this right here is your mother. She usually talks to ignored ferns, to tortoises that live on deserted beaches, and she also routinely fights with decorative rugs. I know you're going to end up really liking her. After all, everyone always does." "Oh, Benjamin." "Huh? Stop making me cry like this immediately. I've already cried and wailed enough for one bathroom in a single business day." Hours later, the two of them ate huge slices of pizza right there, thrown on the living room floor. Because climbing up to the couch upholstery seemed to demand a completely unnecessary physical and emotional effort at that point. At 11 at night, Nora decided to go get her phone that was lost on the glass coffee table. That was when the doormat in the inner hallway entrance, that discreet little rug she had never even noticed in her life, and that looked innocent and apparently harmless, revealed that it had one of its corners subtly lifted. The heel of her shoe got caught in the trap. Everything slowed down. Her arms flew open again. The classic emergency penguin posture, documenting the live despair in real time. The pregnant woman's body was jolted forward. Yes, the universe had conspired to kill her again. However, this time she didn't fall to the floor. But Lord Whiskers, who had already returned from the corporate office through a punctual rescue by Bob, who picked him up exactly at 6 in the evening, was crossing exactly the middle of that falling path. The cat got a massive shock and jumped up, terrified by Nora's loud stumble. The feline's clumsy jump mercilessly knocked over the full glass of water resting on the coffee table. Water splashed all over the living room floor. Lord Whiskers jumped, highly offended, to the top of the couch backrest, displaying the offended dignity of someone who had just suffered a severe, unprovoked physical attack in his own home. "Rug scoreboard, 4. Nora yelled and pointed accusingly at the harmless doormat. "And don't you try to correct me, because this absolutely does count as a rug. It's obviously a direct cousin of the original rug. It's a close blood relative. It comes from the same diabolical family and holds the exact same vindictive corporate energy." Rug 4-0 against Nora, and now Lord Whiskers is an innocent collateral victim of this bloody war. Benjamin, who was lying down in the bedroom, yelled out startled, "Nora, is everything okay out there in the living room?" "It was nothing. Go back to sleep." "Were you by any chance fighting with our entrance doormat? With the vindictive rug disguised as an entrance doormat?" "Yes, it's very different. It may even have an excellent domestic alibi, but I know very well the macabre truth behind it." Benjamin buried his face in the soft pillow and smiled into the darkness. "I love you so much, you crazy woman. I love you so much too. And now just go to sleep." She finally grabbed the forgotten phone off the wet table. There were 7 new messages from Priya sent with desperate urgency, all in a row. Stella just called an emergency meeting with the entire board of directors. It's scheduled for tomorrow, exactly at 9 in the morning. Benjamin hasn't even been notified about the assembly. She's going to use those leaked photos of your crazy slides. And she's going to use that entire terrible newspaper article against you. I heard everything hiding by the wooden door. I'm sorry. Let me know urgently if you need anything that might be useful. Nora stared blankly at the shattered light of the device's screen. Then she cast a glance toward Benjamin, who finally had fallen asleep and was now sleeping heavily in the master bedroom. And lastly, she looked down at her own flat stomach. That same stomach that didn't visually show anything yet, but that in reality was already completely changing everything in her life and in her marriage. That had been the most absurdly happy day and also the most terrifying and complicated day of her life, occurring exactly and simultaneously on the very same day. It was now 3 beautiful pink lines positive with love and 7 frantic messages promising her nothing but a lot of pain and a bloody war. Governor Beatrice. She sighed exhausted and whispered to the gloomy nothingness of the empty apartment. Tomorrow is going to be heavy. Outside, the magical island of Manhattan shined equally for everyone. But inside the 35th floor of the Hayes family company, the gloomy light in Stella Ward's office still shined cold and intensely bright amidst the darkness of the early morning. At exactly 2 a.m, Nora called the number saved in her phone simply as, "It was only 2 rings." The woman on the other end answered immediately, with the firm voice of someone who had been waiting awake next to the device since the exact moment she sent the message. "My name is Elena Voss. I am Stella Ward's former senior assistant. I worked for her for 3 long years. And why did you call me now? Because tomorrow, at 9 a.m, you are going to walk into a meeting with the board of directors having no idea what you're going to find in there, and I have exactly everything you need to protect yourself." Elena spoke uninterruptedly for 10 straight minutes. She listed the existence of contracts, receipts, and proof in the form of old email screenshots. Everything was meticulously organized, like someone who had stockpiled heavy ammunition for 2 entire years, just waiting patiently for the right moment to fire. "How long have you kept all of this with you?" "For 2 years. "But why would you do that?" "Because when I worked for Stella, I was already her 3rd senior assistant, and I saw with my own eyes the previous 2 become scapegoats for her mistakes. I preferred to keep my evidence and shield myself." "Well, that's not exactly what I'd call altruism." "I agree. It's called strategic corporate self-preservation. At this exact moment, I'll gladly take both." Nora hung up the phone. She went straight to the bathroom, sat down once again on the freezing floor, because apparently that bathroom floor was her real executive office. That hard tile was the place where she made all the most important decisions in her life. And at some point, she knew she was going to have to put a pillow down there and fully accept this real estate reality. "Okay, Nora," she said, facing the mirror. "Tomorrow morning, at exactly 9 o'clock, you're going to walk into a locked room with 12 suited executives. A scary former CEO who only speaks using 3-word sentences, and a petty woman who has photos of you confusing fine dining forks with surgical instruments. And on top of all that, you found out you were pregnant. Your husband still knows nothing about this emergency meeting. Your personal therapist is a wild tortoise that lives on another continent. Your current business consultant is a fern in a pot. And your closest emotional support at home is an orange cat that wears a corporate badge, and who abandoned you sprawled in the bathroom last night during the most important moment of your entire life." Her reflection in the mirror obviously didn't answer her, but Nora felt that it agreed with every listed point. The hair is going to urgently need a miracle. The makeup, it's going to be impossible to hide the deep dark circles of someone who only managed to sleep 2 hours a night. The overall dignity, its reserves are stupidly low. The real chances of surviving Stella's attack, definitely much better than she herself thinks. Simply because I have something in my hands that she doesn't. I have proof. At 6 o'clock the next morning, still thrown on the bathroom floor and with her phone resting on speakerphone, Elena was there on the other end of the line, meticulously organizing the entire counterattack with the extreme efficiency of someone who never slept the night before a war. "I haven't slept a single second," Elena confirmed, her voice firm. "Never? Before a big battle like this, I never sleep. After it's over, I hibernate for 12 straight hours. And is that a healthy habit? Absolutely not. But I guarantee you it works." At exactly 8:30 in the morning, Nora was already in her office at the company. She looked at Gertrude, leaning against the window. "Pay attention, Gertrude. Today is going to be the most important day of all, since the first time I watered you in that pot. I'm going to walk into that gigantic room full of people who think I am totally incompetent, and I'm going to show them all the documents that prove that one of those suited people is a major criminal. And I'm going to do all this being scared, being pregnant, with horrific dark circles, and carrying a cat stuffed inside my leather bag, because honestly, I had absolutely no time to leave him back at the house." And as if he had been summoned, Lord Whiskers appeared, perfectly aligned on the edge of the leather bag. Yes, Lord Whiskers, you came with me again. Totally against my will, but totally in favor of yours. As our dynamic has always been. I really need to discuss setting some professional boundaries with you at some point this week. Lord Whiskers couldn't care less, and slowly descended back into the dark bottom of the bag. I don't know if that's an act of feline solidarity on your part, or if you just want to sleep protected in the dark leather. And you don't need to answer me. This time, I prefer to stick with the ambiguity. Priya suddenly appeared at the office door carrying a steaming cup of coffee. She displayed the exact expression of someone who was rapidly correlating biological data with an accurate outcome prediction. You definitely didn't sleep right last night. Of course I slept. And for how long? For about 2 hours. Well, maybe a little less. You were eating leftover lasagna in the morning the day before yesterday. Bought a pregnancy test in a rush at the pharmacy yesterday afternoon. And I sent you 7 maddening messages about today's meeting at exactly 11 at night. I know everything that's going on, Nora. Wait a minute. How do you know about the pregnancy test thing? I work directly on this floor and I know the information flows. I know everything before it happens. What I did was merely use an established correlation that now, from what I see, is statistically confirmed. Priya winked and handed her the hot cup of coffee. Good luck with Stella, Mom. And the agile woman walked out the door before Nora could even think about protesting. 9 o'clock in the morning. The massive board meeting room. Stella was majestically seated at the head of the table. That was a position that clearly did not belong to her, but that she had occupied like an authentic self-proclaimed empress of the corporation. There were 12 heavyweight directors seated in their respective upholstered chairs. Thompson waited with his hands together on the table, in immense strategic silence. Richard rested in the back, as motionless as if he were a gloomy statue inside a luxurious museum that charged an entrance fee. Josh was also present, and standing in one of the corners, carrying an unbelievable 14 pens scattered in his jacket pockets. That was his absolute stress record, a new massive plateau of human anxiety, breaking into completely unexplored territory of so-called emotional stationery. Marcus was there too, simply because Marcus always existed and was present in absolutely all of the most historical moments of Hayes International. He acted in there as if he were an official documentarian that no one in their right mind ever hired. He had his phone purposefully in his jacket pocket and on silent mode. He was recording the audio of everything. It's just to send to the archives, he would probably say later if anyone questioned him. This here is just a corporate document and nothing more. Stella conducted the entire presentation in an extremely methodical way. Every single slide was prepared there with the lethal precision of someone who had just put together an elaborate legal case to frame somebody, but disguised in the form of a simple HR corporate presentation. And there were Nora's infamous leaked internal notes on the big screen. The entirety and the cover of the scandalous newspaper article also appeared. The next slide laid bare images from the leaked photos of that disastrous formal dinner, displaying pictures of Nora fighting confusedly with the forks and sporting a sour face at the oyster and at that poor sad fish served on the plate. Stella stood in front of the illuminated screen and declared, "What we are looking at here is a consistent and irreversible pattern of corporately inappropriate behavior for a vice president." Thompson didn't react at first. He remained completely strategic in his chair. Clearly, he was evaluating and calculating all the options directly through his kidneys, exactly as Nora, unfortunately, had written and exposed in those tragic confidential notes that had already been projected for the entire room to see. Stella turned off the presentation and closed her leather folder with all the satisfaction in the world of someone who had just won, by humiliating the opponent, a dirty game that absolutely nobody had asked to play. Then Nora calmly pulled the laptop out of her own briefcase and opened it on the table. "May I have the floor now?" Nora asked. Richard, with his usual deep voice sounding from the back of the room. "You may." Nora pressed a button and mirrored her evidence screen onto the big screen. It was all right there in huge capital letters. Ward Strategic Solutions. The full name and the tax IDs involved, all the dates, and the colossal amounts of the deposits. And this is how, gentlemen, while Mrs. Stella Ward spent the last few months secretly documenting my supposed bodily inadequacy with forks, she was also leaving tracks and documenting something much more interesting right here in the company's own finances. Each new fraudulent contract began to appear projected and circled in bright red on the screen in an unquestionable manner. Take a look at this extremely expensive receipt right here from Paris. It is for a so-called meeting with a huge group of French investors. A little joke that cost a pompous $34,000 from our coffers. Nora abruptly changed the slide. These famous billionaire investors who, according to the updated official records of our very own International Finance Department, simply do not really exist. That's right, they do not exist absolutely anywhere. Not hidden in the luxurious alleys of Paris, not in the great metropolises of France. And quite possibly, they don't even inhabit this planet Earth. Those illustrious French gentlemen that Stella met with, paying with our own company money, are as real as my own motor skills with refined dessert forks. A competence that, as we all publicly know since last night's scandals, is exactly zero. Sitting at the table, Thompson took his reading glasses, which he notoriously never needed to use in his life, off his face. That tiny gesture was the clear bodily signal that he was, in fact, truly reading every single line and every figure contained in there. The young woman advanced to the next evidence slide. A massive panel appeared with the log of access attempts registered in the HR payroll system. Right there, the origin showed up as an external server. That had happened chronologically exactly 3 days before that terrible article hit the media. And, as you can read with all the clarity in this world, the perverse criminal leak of all the financial and sensitive data contained in my personal file came from outside the building. It was, without a shadow of a doubt, perpetrated with the essential and direct support of someone who worked with us, who had all the privileged access to the platform, and who knew perfectly well exactly where to send them to look. Nora turned her stiff neck and stared piercingly into Stella's eyes. Therefore, I state that my mere supposed social incompetence at dinners is not the only thing actually documented inside this room. Not a single person showed any reaction. Nobody even dared to breathe for a long and crushing 10 seconds. And then Richard cleared his throat to clear the bitter throat in the back. He had just one single question. Stella, is any of these financial accusations true? Stella opened her mouth to speak and, immediately after, swallowed hard and clenched her lips tightly, shutting her mouth with a brutal and silent anger. Her brain froze, paralyzed, faced with the display of evidence for a mere 2 seconds, which seemed like a gigantic abyss of time when you have 12 imposing and threatening people, fiercely counting every single one of those little seconds while they wait for your lie to come out of your throat. Thompson, relentless, observed the former partner, mentally confirming things in silence. Without blinking, he decreed to the entire room loud and clear. Very well. This meeting is officially closed. Stella stays. The room began to empty quickly, with the directors withdrawing in a funeral-like atmosphere. Benjamin tightly held Nora's sweaty hand right there, near the door. Only then did she realize that her own body was shaking compulsively. Nora, you were simply perfect. I'm shaking with freezing hands, and I think I talked non-stop about dessert forks right in the middle of a severe exposition of corporate fraud. I guarantee you, your speech was perfect exactly like that. But Stella wouldn't go down quietly. She still had one last desperate card up her sleeve. Completely cornered, she fired back with a shrill voice, loud enough so that everyone in the hallway could hear her perfectly. At least I don't spend my entire life purposely confusing professional incompetence with this so-called personal authenticity. And doesn't this sudden surprise pregnancy of hers seem just a little too convenient to justify her failures and protect that useless little job? The timing she chose to announce it is much more than convenient. It is pathetic planning. Benjamin abruptly moved his wheelchair forward, blocking the woman's path, and locked the wheels with a dry thud on the hardwood floor. Without any rush, and without the slightest sign of desperation in the volume of his voice. Say one more word. It was just 5 words from Benjamin, but they sounded like a true sharp razor. Everyone in the hallway froze in place. From inside the room, old Richard looked deeply towards Stella with immense disappointment. And this time, it wasn't just that cold, calculated corporate disappointment. That was an overwhelming and painfully personal disappointment. Stella swallowed her hatred and stomped her heavy steps toward the elevators. Before disappearing at the end of the hallway, she brushed roughly and purposefully against Nora's shoulder, taking advantage of the absence of close witnesses to dig a venomous whisper straight into her ear. "Remember, hillbilly? I didn't act alone in this game. Remember that very well tonight, when you and your little husband sit at home and mistakenly think you've won the war against me." And the executive elevator's metal door closed heavily in her face. Already inside another elevator, heading down to the ground floor alone, Benjamin accompanied his wife in silence. "What was it that viper hissed at you up there?" "She told me to remember that she didn't act alone in this whole dirty corporate plan." Benjamin clenched his jaw in anger as he stared at the closed doors. "I know she didn't. And do you by any chance already know exactly who helped her?" "I have a suspicion, but I still don't have any real proof, nor the absolute certainty to say the miserable individual's name out loud." The ground floor of the elevator finally opened into the gleaming lobby. Nora stopped and looked relieved at her own wrinkled and marked reflection in the large mirrored steel doors of the exit lobby before walking through them. She did her survivor's verbal inventory. The hair, still totally destroyed. The fancy makeup, already non-existent on my face at this point. My corporate and personal dignity, fully restored with tremendous success. My real and visible chances of surviving working here in this company. Now things are statistically much improved on my side. She sighed, tired. Comical and embarrassing mentions regarding doll salad forks in the middle of a serious and extremely grave billionaire fraud denunciation against the board of directors. Just one unusual mention tallied. That is, without a doubt, my new personal record, Benjamin. Benjamin, who was calmly guiding his wheelchair right behind her toward the exit, countered with a smile. "And I heard you narrate every wonderful line of that closing report of yours loud and clear, my unlikely wife." "Wait, so I said all of that out loud again?" "My love, you always do." Stella was removed. Those 3 words should look like a major corporate victory. They looked like something else entirely, because truly earned victories never come with a hidden asterisk, but this one definitely did. Benjamin quietly walked into the office, closed the door and sat facing her. The board wants a gesture of stability in return. And how do you define this gesture? A voluntary corporate leave of absence. 30 days of leave. Mine. Nora dropped her pen. It hit the desk, rolled across the glass, and fell to the floor. Neither of them made a move to pick it up. "You already decided this before telling me." "Yes. When?" "When you presented those contracts all by yourself this morning. I saw that you didn't need me to be there to win your own fight." That sounds like a compliment that actually really hurts, Benjamin. The absolute worst category there is. It sits right in the middle between, you are too strong of a woman and you don't need anyone's help. Both of them always lie. But I'm not lying right now. And I know that, which is what makes all this worse. Nora stood up, walked over to Gertrude at the window, examined the roots pressing against the edge of the pot. She silently picked up the larger pot she had brought from home that morning. Because, obviously, Nora had brought a pot from home for the company fern. Because that was exactly what emotionally functional vice presidents did as part of a management protocol that, unfortunately, didn't exist in any HR manual yet. And she started repotting, without announcing it, without explaining it. Removed the old soil and settled the suffering roots into the clean comfort of the new pot. Benjamin watched her in silence. "You are repotting, Gertrude." She was suffocating in here, the roots pressing against the old pot as if it were too small for what she wanted to be in the world. "And you are doing this while we discuss my leave of absence." Gertrude also processes grief the best way she can. I repot her, she grows. Meanwhile, my husband leaves for 30 days. It's beautiful how everyone contributes to this piece. Yes, I heard that sounding passive-aggressive. I heard every letter coming out of my mouth, and I couldn't stop myself. No, you know what? The filter hasn't come back, and it isn't going to come back. 30 days is too long of a punishment, Benjamin. I know it is. It's 30 days. And I am pregnant with your baby, and the father of this child is now going on an involuntary vacation. Nora, it isn't a vacation in Asia. It's a vacation in exile disguised as a gesture of corporate stability. Lord Whiskers opened both eyes at the same time. Maximum alert signal. Yes, Lord Whiskers, I yelled. I know. Sue me. Add it to your bi-weekly external consulting report. She took a deep breath. I'm sorry, Benjamin. I know it's the only right decision. I know it protects the program in the long run. And I know that in 30 days you'll be back and the company will breathe easier. And even knowing all of that, she walked over to him. This idea hurts me too much. The man held her wet face with both of his hands. I promise you that this distance is going to hurt me just as much as it hurts you. That doesn't make the scenario any better. No. But it helps me deal with it. Just a little. Lord Whiskers climbed down from the chair and walked silently over to their feet. Sat down between them. He kept looking from one to the other in absolute silence, evaluating the damage in real time. He's mediating our crisis masterfully, Nora said, wiping her eyes. Does our cat always do this? He does all the things on this earth except what we ask him to. It's the great rule of selective inverse obedience, his personal corporate operational principle. Richard knocked on the door. Once. Walked 2 steps in. Stood there. As was customary, he didn't sit down. Evaluated the scene in silence. Gertrude with dirt scattered on the windowsill. Lord Whiskers between the two of them on the floor. The red eyes of his daughter-in-law, who had just been screaming about a vacation in exile. He didn't comment on any of it. Your wellness program remains untouched, funded by the Hayes family. No strings attached to the investment. No review at the end of 6 weeks. But the agreed deadline, canceled by the board this afternoon. Benjamin opened his mouth. 34% improvement in 3 weeks. Richard looked at the numbers on the wall screen. Nora, you bet your own job to get this program approved. I'm telling you right now that you never have to do that again. My father-in-law, Richard, she said genuinely. Thank you very much. He stopped, as if the word carried a different weight than usual. Richard Hayes received reports all day long, not expressions of gratitude, and a genuine thank you coming from a person who talked to ferns was apparently a new emotional category to process. The patriarch turned his back to leave, stopped, still facing away. Margaret was really completely right about you. And he left before she could process the words. Oh my God, he did it again! Nora yelled to the empty office. He dumps a devastating sentence and walks away. Like normal people say massive things and then just evaporate from the room. The entire Hayes family communicates through newspaper headlines and then vanishes. Is this a genetic defect? Is there treatment available in science? Benjamin answered calmly. No, and definitely no. You see? 3 no's, fired off in 3 short words. You guys train for this and do it on purpose. And, for the first time that day, Benjamin almost truly laughed. Almost. I'll go talk to my father before the 30 days begin. Okay, go. He left. Nora stood watching through the hallway glass. Richard standing, not sitting as usual. Benjamin entering, his father's canes leaning sideways against the desk. The two of them face to face, silence clashing against silence, at frequencies that only they could tune into. 15 minutes. Benjamin came back. What did he say? He took a deep breath. That when he was sent to Tokyo to take care of the branch, Margaret stayed alone in New York, carrying the company and the family. He admitted the decision to go was his, and confessed that it took him years to understand the real cost that took on her. He had never told you that before. Never. I think all this chaos from the last few weeks, and especially seeing how you defend the people inside here, made the old man process things he had swallowed a long time ago. Nora asked no more questions. Because sometimes just knowing that answer existed in the air now was enough for today. She walked Benjamin to the elevator. He was carrying only his fine leather briefcase, the only material thing that fit into the pain of 30 days of forced absence. He stepped into the cabin, turned his chair around. The two looked at each other with held-back tears. Take good care of Gertrude for me, he murmured. Take good care of yourself, she added. And take care of Lord Whiskers, Nora. Lord Whiskers takes extremely good care of himself. I am the one who is completely dependent on him. It's an inversely bizarre adoption relationship. Benjamin almost let a smile escape. The doors began to close. Nora raised her hand in a small wave. Enough for the moment. The doors clicked shut. She stood in the empty hallway for a long time. Like corporate magic, Lord Whiskers appeared and walked silently until he was next to her legs. He sat on the reception rug with his eyes fixed on the closed elevator doors. 30 days. She sighed. He looked at the slit between the doors and didn't move from the floor. It's going to go by fast, she said, trying to comfort them both. It was very obvious that neither of them believed that, but it felt really good to say it out loud anyway. Nora went back to the office after the elevator closed and did the only thing that made sense at that moment. Opened her computer and typed Alexander Hayes into the building's access system. 17 records, 6 months. All of them after 8 p.m. No meeting minutes, no emails, no meetings with any living person. A person who entered a real building and didn't exist in any official document. Gertrude, she said to the newly repotted fern in the window. Who is Alexander Hayes? Gertrude maintained her usual botanical silence, professional to the very end. Nora searched the directory, the general system, HR records, old files, nothing. Zero anywhere. A person who went up to the 35th floor 17 times in 6 months and didn't exist in any known system. She closed the computer, looked at the wall in the outer hallway. The framed Hayes family tree was there. She walked past it every day without ever really looking at it. Because who stops to read a family tree? People who are looking for someone who shouldn't exist, apparently. She walked over to it. Dark wood frame, names in elegant typography. Richard Hayes married to Margaret Hayes. Line down, Benjamin Hayes. And next to Richard, a lateral line, a brother, Alexander Hayes, and below the name, a severed line, scratched out, as if someone had drawn something over it after a long time. A correction that left a trail for anyone who knew how to look. Lord Whiskers had silently followed her there and sat next to her, looking at the frame. As if cats understood family trees and family tragedies. They probably did. They just didn't comment. Nora grabbed her phone, typed, saw the tree. Is the severed line you? Typing bubble. 3 words. It was Richard. She looked at her phone, at the tree, at her phone again. Richard was at the office door when she turned around. 4th time he appeared without being summoned. In the others, there was a clear purpose. The program, the funding, the sentence about Margaret. This time he was there without knowing exactly why. And Richard Hayes with no declared purpose was something that probably hadn't happened since the 90s. Nora showed him the phone. He read it slowly. Reread it. His expression changed. Not the calculating one, not the cold one. Something she had never seen in him. Cost. The kind of expression that appears when someone finds what they buried years ago and discovers it was still alive underground. Where did you get that? It came to me 20 minutes ago. Did you answer? I asked who it was. What did he say? She showed him. Richard read, handed the phone back without a word, walked over to the window, stood with his back to her. Richard. He knows where my office is. He knows Gertrude's name. He visits this building 17 times in 6 months after 8 at night without showing up in any system. Richard stopped with his hand on the door. Didn't turn around. This matter is not yours yet. He left. The word yet hung in the air like an unsigned card, present impossible to ignore. Nora stood looking at the empty hallway. Lord Whiskers jumped onto the desk and gently placed his paw on her phone. No diagnosis. No feline philosophy. Just company. Thank you, she said softly. Priya appeared half an hour later with a folder and slightly red eyes, which was unprecedented for the person who processed all the information on the planet without blinking. 3-week program report. Satisfaction, up 34%. Turnover, projected 40% drop for the quarter. Therapy sessions, 89% occupancy in the first week. We did this. You did this. We did. Priya wiped the corner of her eye. I'm crying at work. Me too. Josh appeared right after with the approved financial report. Nora looked at his jacket pocket out of pure reflex. 3 pens, just 3, the normal number. Josh's number on a crisis-free day. She didn't say anything, but she smiled. Email from Thompson. Subject, congratulations. Body. The kidney one was right. 34% exceeds any projection the board would have approved. Thompson. Gertrude. Nora turned to the fern with the energy of someone who just received a medal. Kidney Thompson congratulated us with a formal signature. This is historically unprecedented. Gertrude glowed in the window with the serenity of someone who knew from the start that it was going to work out. Marcus appeared at the door with a tablet and the expression of a journalist on a mission. Nora, I saw it in the security system. Someone visits the building after 17 times. No record. Can I investigate? No, but it's a corporate. Marcus, no, investigating. That, fine. He left, came back. Can I at least record Gertrude? She's grown too much. It's high-quality organic content. Get out, Marcus. He left. He was going to investigate anyway. Everyone knew it. The gala email arrived at 5 in the afternoon. Hayes International Annual Gala, Grand Hyatt. Friday, black tie. Nora accepted automatically. Stopped. Looked at the screen. Benjamin was on leave. She was going alone. To the Hayes family gala, pregnant, without her husband, with a father-in-law who had just pronounced the word yet as if it were a heavy promise, and with a ghost uncle who secretly visited the building and knew the fern's name. Lord Whiskers, I'm going to need armor. The cat closed his eyes. I'm going to call Margaret. Alexander's message arrived at 9 at night. Long. At the gala, you will meet people who pretend I don't exist. Don't believe them. You will meet people who will say I am the villain of this story. Don't believe them either. And you will meet a person who is afraid to see me after 30 years. Believe that person, but understand that fear is not weakness. It's what's left when someone does something that cannot be undone. Take care of the baby, and Benjamin, and Gertrude. She will need a bigger pot soon. Nora read it 3 times. He knew about the baby, knew Gertrude's name. The messages with Benjamin arrived right after. Did you get a message from Alexander Hayes? When I was a kid, my dad mentioned a brother once. Never again. The family never talked about him. Benjamin. The family tree in the office has a severed line. I saw it today. An entire minute of silence. Nora, take care of yourself at the gala. You aren't coming? Leave of absence. Then come anyway. I know, but I can't. Then send Margaret to me. She already knows. Of course she already knows. Nora stared at the dark window. Lord Whiskers had returned to the executive chair and was sleeping with the authority of someone who had clocked out and does not accept overtime. She was about to turn off her computer when her phone rang. It wasn't Benjamin. It was an entirely different number. No name, no history, no record anywhere. She answered. The voice was male, calm. The kind of calm that comes from decades of practice in being invisible. Nora Hayes. My name is Alexander. Can we meet before the gala? There is something you need to know before walking into that ballroom. Something Richard isn't ready to tell you yet. The office went completely quiet. Even Gertrude seemed to stop breathing. Yes, she said. We can. Nora hung up the phone slowly. Outside the window, Manhattan continued to shine as if nothing had changed. But something inside her had already changed. Because sometimes life doesn't warn you when a new chapter begins. It just places someone unexpected in our path and waits to see if we'll have the courage to keep going. Lord Whiskers opened one eye from the executive chair, observing Nora in absolute silence, as if even he understood that, from then on, nothing would ever be simple again. And maybe that is the hardest part of growing up. Discovering that belonging somewhere doesn't mean living without fear. It means to keep on walking, even when fear exists. Nora taught us that courage is not the absence of insecurity. That kindness can still survive in cold environments. And that some people enter our lives not to destroy us, but to show us who we truly are when everything starts to fall apart. If you've ever felt like you had to fight to find your place in the world, remember this. The fact that someone doesn't recognize your worth never diminishes the light that exists inside of you. And if this story touched your heart, leave a like and tell me here in the comments, what moment moved you the most so far? And of course, from 0 to 10, what rating does this story deserve up to this point? To be continued.